Welcome to another edition of Living a Bold Life. As you can see, I've got an amazing guest with me for this episode, and this is my friend, Alia Weston. And Alia is zooming in from South Africa, so it's such a gift to get to be with her, working through the time changes, working through some of the tech issues, and from some storms they've had. So here we are. Welcome, Alia. How are you today, my love?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks for inviting me. It's so good to be with you, Jen.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So if anyone is back for this episode, it's so good to be with you. If you are new to the series, this is a guest interview series that I felt called to create sometime in the summer. And I just feel really called to use my platform to share other people's journeys and show all the similarities in them, but then also all the differences in them. And, also I've been sharing stuff for 7 years. I think people probably appreciate hearing from other people besides just me. So thank you for being here. And my favorite thing about this is I think very often when I ask interviewees if they want to be on here, they're like, am I living a bold enough life? And, the way I see it is living a bold life is it's just showing up, it's committing, it's making an impact. You don't have to be doing crazy leaps all day, every day. It's just really being true to your authentic self. And that's what we're here for, because a lot of times to live a bold life, there are challenges, and very often they're not talked about. And it really creates, an ugly comparison thing we have going, where if we're struggling, we think there's something wrong. We think other people have it so easy, and we all have challenges. So we're gonna share a snippet of Alia's bold journey with you. And before we get started with the questions, I'm just going to share who Alia is. We actually had to hop off this interview and restart because of the Wi-Fi. So you get to hear all about yourself again. Dr. Alia Weston is an associate professor of creative and business enterprise at OCAD University, Toronto. She is a designer, educator, and entrepreneur. Her work examines the ways that businesses and creativity contribute to social change through topics such as social innovation and education, sustainable and creative economies, decolonial business, and food methods. Alia's view is that for any work focused on social change, it is essential for us to examine ideas and practices to understand what we are not seeing and the unintended consequences of our actions. Very coach-like, I love that. At OCAD University, Alia co-leads the minor in entrepreneurship and social innovation and teaches a range of courses that support art and design students in developing socially beneficial business capabilities. Alongside her work as an educator and researcher, Alia runs 2 jewelry businesses. With Alia Weston Jewelry, she creates an innovative range of art jewelry made from precious metal lace, which is a celebration of her mixed heritage and through which she supports fellow artisans. And then the site for that and the link for that, I'm all gonna have that in the bio on whatever platform you're watching this on. So just hop down there and you can access that. For her second brand, Fireflies Atelier, did I say that right this time? Alia creates a range of vibrant, nature-inspired gemstone jewelry using sustainable practices that contribute to greater well-being for people and the planet. For every item sold, she plants a tree for school children to enjoy in Zimbabwe. And then I'll also have the place that you can find her on that. So you guys see me doing this a lot. AirPods are not one size fits all. They always want to fall out of my ears. I need to find a better way. But Alia, for the jewelry that you're wearing now, which jewelry line is that from?
So this is from the Alia Weston jewelry line, and it's the lace jewelry.
Okay, that's what I was thinking when I saw the metal, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that you're wearing it so everyone can see it today. And I've gotten to see it in person, and it is just delicate and beautiful and made with so much love, which I think goes a long way if you're going to wear that on your body, right? All right, sister. So now that you've gotten to hear all about yourself twice today, are you ready to dive into some of the questions?
Yes.
All right. And so if you are new to this, I actually ask each person the same 5 questions in each episode. I think it's part of the powerful way we get to kind of show the commonality, but then get to see the rich individuality within all of it. And so remembering that we are just catching a snippet of these guests' bold lives. There's so much more that we're not going to get to see here. And this is fun, the first question, because I know a lot of the guests and I know some of the things they've done, but I never know what they're going to say. So this is all new to me too. I get to receive it with you. So Alia, knowing that throughout your life, you've made multiple bold moves, what is the one that you feel called to share in this moment?
I think when I was thinking about this, I think the biggest way that I make bold moves is to always be open to the unexpected, because my thought is that you never know what will add up to a life, where a life is going to go and where it's going to evolve. And so I think my most significant evolutions or revolutions in my life are because I did unexpected things. And I started out being an artist, and I never planned to be a professor or an educator. So, being bold is like where I've actually ended up in my life and where I am today and all the things that I'm doing at the same time. And so I left university as a jewelry designer, and I was immersed in creating things. I love making, I love being a designer, but I was really unsure what to do next because they actually didn't teach us how to run a business, right? Most artists are business people, but you don't get taught these skills. And so I grew up in Zimbabwe, and then I studied in the UK, and I was basically clueless, coming out of university. And this is not actually my most bold move, what led me to my bold move was that I had an opportunity to talk about creative careers to youth just when I was finishing my studies. And I thought, okay, well, why not? Like, I never thought about going to give talks or anything. So I went to talk about it. And that actually ended me up in my first career, which was teaching. I got invited to come and run 3 summer schools, teaching youth about creative arts. And I even took 50, 16-year-olds to Paris for the day for a cultural excursion trip. And we were running down the Seine at one point because one of the young people left her passport in a brown paper bag, lunch bag on a boat. And so it's like these kind of beautiful, crazy moments, which made me realize that there was far more to life and more interesting ways that I could actually apply my creative skills, which made me actually go back to university. And I signed up to do a master's in business. And for an artist, to flip completely to a totally different career, to go study at a master's level in business, there was only one university that I could even get a place at, because most universities wanted you to have prior business studies experience for a master's. And so they, invited people from all kinds of different backgrounds. And through that, I realized, wow, I can actually apply my creative thinking in really interesting ways, and really creativity and business are not two completely alien worlds. And I can think creatively in a business context, not only about, creating beautiful things, but also about, the way I think about the world and things like social change and creating new ideas. And that is what led me to my boldest move, was that I did my PhD by accident. So I didn't intend to. I was having this conversation with my cousin, and he was at Oxford, and he was talking about he had done a master's and he was doing a PhD, and he left. And I said to my aunt, I said, why does he get to do a PhD and I don't get to do a PhD? I literally don't even know why I said that. I have no idea. And she goes, well, I don't know, you're a jeweler and you did a business degree, and you were totally fine. She's like, I'm sure you can do a PhD if you want to. I think it's going to be no problem. Like, she was talking like I was already doing it. And I was like, okay, I just I think anything of it. And the next day, there was an email sent around from my university, said that the application process for PhDs are open. And I was like, oh my God, it's a sign. Maybe I should sign up to do a PhD. And so I signed up to do a PhD. And like, there are a few things that happened, but like, basically I got accepted. And then I was like, oh, like, what do I do now? Okay, so basically I had no idea what I was doing, but I thought it'd be a really interesting opportunity. And so my PhD was about creativity in the informal economy. So I basically became an I did economics in like from a sociology point of view, and I taught myself how to do it. And yeah, that's the biggest bold move I've ever done, is completely switch to something completely different and outside of my comfort zone, and do a PhD in a subject that I knew nothing about.
I love so much about this. And first, let me acknowledge your courage, because to be open to the unexpected does take a lot of courage. We're not very wired for it. And I particularly love those who are bringing this message, because I think that was a really, really huge lesson 2020. And still, you know, we're still in the energy of what 2020 brought up. And I think we've all learned that there can be a big detriment if we're attached to what we expect, right? Because things just got ripped out from under our feet. And I love what you said. You know, I was an artist and I didn't know how to run a business. They didn't teach us that. Because, you know, I see the same thing. A lot of my colleagues in coaching, they don't make it in coaching. And it's not because they're not amazing coaches. It's because they spend all this money on their training and then they don't know how to run a business. And so they don't get the help on how to run a business. So that's great that you mentioned that. You know, so if anyone watching this is really good at their trade or their skill and you have never run a business, why would you be good at something you've never done? You know, get some support with that. There's nothing wrong with you. It's like, you know, how would you know how to cook a certain meal if you've never done it, you know, and it's not your forte. So I love that you said that. And so I kind of love the trajectory too, because here you're just open. You get asked to talk about creative careers. Okay, that sounds good. I'll do it. Then you get asked to do this summer school. And then you bring, and I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm a volunteer leadership coach for high school girls. And 10 of them is a lot. And when I heard you say 50 in Paris, I was like, oh, I would need a coaching session to do that one. And losing
just
passport.
Out of university.
Yes.
I was just out of university as well.
That's a big undertaking. And what I love is, then it kind of came into PhD. And what I love that you shared is, what was it, your aunt? That you were talking to?
Yes.
Okay, what I love about that is, I am such a firm believer that when one of us or people with us are actually talking about it like it's happened or happening, it creates a different feedback loop. There's actually a really cool technique called Kailigo, where two people just get together and they go over an event that they're afraid of, and they talk about it like it's already happened. And what it does to the mind is insanely powerful. So I love that, because I have no doubt that you and your aunt cultivated that for you by the way you acted about it.
Totally.
Powerful. So y'all hear that? You know, talk about it like you've already got it, because when you're in the energy of it having already happened, that's the energy that's going to make it happen. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing it in the way that you did, because what it also shows is bold moves are usually a series of things, right? It's not just like, oh, I'm just going to go make the leap. There's usually things that bring us there. So thank you for normalizing the process. Right. So these questions are really organic and flowing. So very often you start kind of answering one in the one before it, and it's designed that way. And so you may say something you've already said, or this question may have you feel called to share something you haven't. But if we kind of look at, when push came to shove, was there anything that really got you to make the move? Sometimes there is, and sometimes there's not. So was there anything that kind of got you to take that leap into PhD? And it might have just been what you said about noticing that someone else had already done it.
Yeah, well, my cousin was doing his PhD. It wasn't something that ever crossed my mind ever to do anything like that. And so I'm in this process, and my aunt is like, "Oh, you can totally do a PhD." So nonchalantly, like, it's happening already. And then I'm like, okay. So I contact my advisor, and I'm like, "How do you write a PhD proposal?" And he goes, "You just write one." And, I really respect my advisor. We have a great relationship, but that was like probably some of like the best and worst advice at the same time that I could have been given. It was, it wasn't particularly great advice to just write it, but and what it made me do was be, I'm like, I got to figure this out because, I'm doing a PhD. So I Googled it, and I was like, how to write a PhD proposal. And so this course came up that was happening that afternoon at another university. And so I called them up and said, "I don't go to university, but I really want to come to your course, your workshop. Can I come?" And they said yes. So I turned up at this workshop. We're talking about writing PhD proposals. So I found the learning experience for myself. And then we're talking, the guy says, "What do you want to do? Talk about your projects." And I talked about my project, and he said, "Well, if you came to the university, you couldn't do it like that. You wouldn't be able to do it that way. You'd have to do it in this other way." And I thought, oh, stuff that. I want to do my PhD in the way that I want to do it, like I already had this idea already in one day. And then I went home and I wrote my proposal and I applied. And I think it was also something, I kind of ignited this passion. It was for writing about what life is like in Zimbabwe, where I'm from, and that work doesn't happen in the same way. Creativity doesn't happen in the same way. We've had this crisis in the country more than 20 years. We had an economic, people are very resourceful and creative, and it just wasn't written like that in my textbooks that when I was at university. And I was like, knowledge from the world that nobody's talking about, and I really want to share this and say something about it. So it was one of the big reasons that made me make that move, is because I was really passionate about what I was doing already. And it was also because in high school, actually, I had this teacher who had told me that I couldn't do English. And I called my parents in to say that I couldn't do English. And I think it just was because I just didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. And so I was at like a PhD level, and I was writing in a way that I remember trying to write in high school and being told that it wasn't right. And it just made me reflect that actually I am, I'm far more capable than maybe I realized, and there were, life experiences that held me back. And I don't do this, I will regret it for the rest of my life.
I love that. Because kind of the way like that I heard it, that I want to reflect back for the listeners too. Because oftentimes, through coach lens, I pick up on things other people might not. And kind of what I heard is you saw your cousin doing it, and it generated in you like a curiosity. Wonder if I could do that. Why can't I do that? Which I love, because I think a lot of times the way our brains work, we see people doing it and we don't get curious, like we get jealous or something, or we like wonder what's wrong with me for not doing it. So curiosity is such an expansive lens. And then the next piece that I really want to point out in your process to our listeners is you talked about it. If we keep it here and we don't share it with people, we don't get to I mean, it's a missing, right? We have to talk about it, think about it, and take action for it. You talked about it, and you talked about it with someone who could bolster you and lift you up with it. And then my little notes look like a little bit cat scratch here, but you got support, and very often when we're taking these leaps, support versus no support is a really big factor. And so you got support, and then it sounds like you really noticed that you could give yourself more credit than you had been, which is huge, because oftentimes we do sell ourselves short. So really, really love that process that you shared. It's powerful. And I'm hoping now that I'm done sharing that you are unfrozen. Oh, okay. So we're going to give this a minute and see if Alia gets back in here quickly, and then we can just keep the interview rolling. I've got 2 out of the 5 questions. These darn AirPods, while we're sitting here waiting, if anyone has tips for small ears for these to stay in, please let me know. When I talk and my ears move, they just loosen and loosen, and then boop, one will fall right out. This one size fits all nonsense is a farce. Actually, I can pause the recording. I'm going to pause it. Okay. I was talking like I needed to entertain our viewers, and then I was like, hello, you can hit pause. So finally, my bright mind was like, oh, I can just pause it so Ollie can talk. And you have a guest with us now too. So wonderful.
Yes.
All right. So fortunately, you were not frozen when you were sharing. So that actually did work out very well. And so I just kind of recapped to the audience what I heard, because there was so much profoundness in what you shared. I really wanted them to get all the different nuggets of where you went. So next question is, and answer this one in any way that's true for you, because we don't all have a formula per se on how we keep living a bold life. But for many of us, we do find that to keep showing up, to keep taking these moves, some of us do notice there are certain things we need, right? Some people might say, I need a lot of sleep to keep showing up like that. We all need different stuff. And for some of us, it can even change seasonally. So for you, Alia, is there anything that you're really present to where I really have to have certain things in place to really keep showing up as a leader, to really keep showing up in my highest and best? What are those for you personally?
Yeah, I was thinking about this question a lot before today, and I think there's 3 things that are really, really important to me. So the first thing is always looking at barriers in a creative way. So I mentioned that I'm from Zimbabwe, and we, they've had a crisis in the country, economic, social, all kinds of things just don't work in the way that they do, like where I live in Canada. And what it's taught me is that, always look at barriers in creative ways. And we, I talked about this thing of like bad advice versus good advice. And that led me to actually go take action myself. And find Google and find a way to figure out how to write a PhD proposal. And I think that's something that is because of where I've been raised. And I do really want to point out, so for me, it's that if we think about it as bad luck or good luck, it can be either of those. It just depends on one's perspective. And I think some of the biggest frustrations in my life and challenges have been the best things that ever happened to me. And what my PhD was about was this creativity that we have here, which is about creativity in adversity and how you can transform your challenges in ways that are completely unexpected and creative and actually give you new opportunities and new creative ways of being by actually working through those challenges. And here in Zimbabwe, there's a Shona word called kukiakia, which kind of roughly translates to that. And in English, we say, we just have to make a plan. And so it's very Zimbabwean lingo of like, something goes wrong and it's like, okay, we're going to make a plan and we're just going to figure it out. And so for me, it's like, I always have to come back to that, to being creative and figuring it out. And one example of this is that I actually applied for a scholarship during my PhD, and I didn't get one. And I found out later that the committee had said that my work was really weird and that it was very different to what other people were studying. And they didn't think I was going to finish, especially because of where I was doing my project, that it was in Zimbabwe and we had the crisis, and they just didn't think that I would be able to do my data collection. So I ended up I was like, I want to do this. So I worked, I lectured part-time, and I actually ended up creating my career for myself. And it wasn't even until the end of my PhD that I decided to be a professor or to apply to a professor job. But I realized when I got to that point that I had actually all of this work experience from even back to the time when I had done the summer schools and then all of the time in my teaching. I was extremely qualified without even realizing it. And it's all because I just used that mentality of like, okay, I've got to figure this out and try something and not let this perceived barrier get in my way. So that's number one.
That is awesome. And I love that you shared that, because, you know, you're speaking about like this mindset that really got cultivated in Zimbabwe. And then I've spent a lot of time in Toronto, and even though Canada's close to the States, it's also still a very different mindset than even the United States. Because I went there when I was doing my master's in a program that was really about disability. And I noticed there how everything was very inclusive, and how, you know, we're going to events down here in the States and we're carrying my friends in wheelchairs up the stairs because it's not even ADA compliant, right? So I love that you're sharing this, because I feel like what you see a lot in the States, when we had a barrier, it's not an invitation to get curious about how to get through it, above it, or around it. It's uh-oh, it's not accessible now, and I'm trapped, and I need to stop, and I don't get to have this. And then we go and get mad and disempowered, and you're really talking about something that's so important. So I love that you shared this. Plus, that was a really fun word that you used. Will you say that again?
So the Shona word is kukiakia, and in English we say make a plan.
That's so beautiful. It sounds way better the way you said it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So y'all keep remembering that a barrier is a very normal and natural thing when you are doing something you've never done before. And it's simply an invitation to say, how can I think outside of the box? I love it. What's your second one?
Okay, so my second one is to always be daring, but to be daring in a way where like I do what I love and what I believe in. And it's about being of service. And like the daring part is like, even if anybody thinks it's unconventional, even better if everybody thinks it's unconventional, because I've sort of cultivated this life where, you know, the creative person in a business context, like where does that come from? Or the person in a creative context, right? We that life in these kind of like I love but everyone thought we business I didn't get because I was doing a really good work. Actually, I just carried on persisting and, you know, doing this project about something that was very important to me in my life, you know, the place where I come from, the cultures here, showing that there are different kinds of knowledge in the world, which I think is so important, right? We have many different knowledges from all of those need to be shared in many different places so we can know about these, right? And that actually led me, you know, the job that I have now, you know, when everybody was like, oh, what is a, you know, we don't teach artists about business. Like, why would we do that? Artists don't know anything about business. Why would we teach them? Like, that's the kind of mentality that I had at university. But my job, when I saw it, was like, I was like, oh my God, that looks like my resume. And I almost didn't apply to it because I thought it was too good to be true, that it didn't exist. And then when I got it, somebody later said, you know what, we wrote that job description and we just put down our wish list, and we really didn't think that there was a person that existed. And I was like, what are the odds? It was, you know, I really believe that it was because I stuck with what I believed in. So that was a big thing for me. For me as well, you know, it's.
Can I say really one more thing before you go to the third one? So what
no, I'm still talking about the second one.
Oh, you're still on the daring. Okay, yes, carry on.
No, I was just saying that, you know, it's always important to me to have a practical impact in the world. And I wanted to just share this story because, you know, I'm a mixed race person, and I realized that being mixed and between worlds is my greatest superpower. And I didn't always realize that because I was always the odd one out everywhere. You know, when I was younger, I didn't have a lot of confidence, so I always felt like I didn't fit. But, you know, actually being between worlds has a lot of power in it. So I'm British and South African, and I was born and raised in Zimbabwe. Also lived in Kenya as well. So I've lived in many places. I've lived in the UK and Canada as well. And like I said, for the longest time, I didn't really fit in. But it's only like now that I'm older, I realize that bringing all of my gifts is really important. But doing those in a way that is with social purpose is really important to me too. So actually it was illegal for my parents to get married.
Oh.
And I will pause there. Like, my mom grew up in apartheid South Africa, and she is a Cape Malay South African who's like a brown person like me, and my dad is English. And at that time it was illegal. My mom would have gone to jail and my dad would have been deported if the government had found out, which is why my parents moved to Zimbabwe and I grew up here. And so it's always kind of like made me think a lot about social justice, but about social justice through a lens of love and about doing things with values and principles. And so for me, like, my mom is very much, you know, I grew up with this conscience of like doing things for others and being of service. And, you know, whether it's volunteering or philanthropy or anything like that, but always doing it through a lens of care and love. And I want to quote Bell Hooks, who I absolutely adore, who's an author I adore. And she has this book called All About Love, New Visions. And she talks about how genuine love is about care and commitment and trust and knowledge and responsibility and respect, but that there can be no love without justice. And so the way that I think is really important in my teaching is to always bring, you know, be daring, you know, do what you believe, do what I believe, be of service, but like bring this, for me, it's bringing an ethic of like love into that. Because really my parents, you know, they defied the law because they loved each other. And, you know, that is the reason that I exist today.
Amazing. So like, I got excited immediately when you said be daring, because even though my new website is live, we haven't officially launched it yet, but on the homepage literally says, hello friend, you are brave and daring. That's how it starts. And so I love that you started with that and then went into being in service, because leaders who are really committed to conscious thought leadership, leaders serve. And that's been a part of any leadership program I've been in, you know, the one that you and I were in together, that was an element, you know, and I think a lot of times we don't realize being in service to other humans, it elevates us, it lifts our floor. It feels good to serve. But I love what you mentioned, because service in and of itself is an action. And we always, in the work that I do, want to look at the being that's driving the action. Because if you're in service from obligation or something, it's disingenuous, right? It's not going to be authentic. But when we're in service, because we're committed to social justice with love, we know the power of bringing the heart. Love is truly, you know, and we can study it now. We can measure emotion love is the most transformative energy there is. And so it is the most powerful way to lead. Now I know why I met you in hardcore leadership. It makes so much sense. But,
Totally.
it's so important what you're sharing. And thank you for speaking to the piece about being mixed background is your superpower, and how you didn't feel like you fit in at first. And now you have found that, because you know what I'm even noticing with you know, over the past year, I like to see how story is told by bringing issues to light. And I'm noticing in a lot of the Netflix shows and stuff like that, they are having characters who are mixed backgrounds, and they're bringing that into the story about how some of them don't feel like they have a place, and they're speaking to that heavily. So I love what you're sharing to normalize it for anyone else who might be having that experience. You've now found it's your superpower, and I hope if anyone watching this is having the experience where they don't fit, that you can find a way to, because what I really hear with what you did was it's a lot of the work of what I would consider integration, like really integrating all that you are and who you are, and just bringing it, which is bold in and of itself.
Yeah, and I've done a lot of work around that, like continually. It's like about my work and my personal life and me as a person, but like, you know, I can only be fully me if I integrate.
Yes, and I love that, because actually a lot of what I do with clients is integrate. You know, I always try to get people like, y'all, you've got a muscle to it. You're really great at it over here. It's just challenging here. So you just need to learn how to use the muscle in a new area. So it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So powerful. And especially too, sharing your parents' story. Because, you know, that wasn't even that long ago. And it wasn't even that long ago. And it's just a beautiful testament to what your parents did for their love for each other. How they were not going to be stopped, and they were going to find a way for love to prevail and to be together. That's a love story. And I was getting all the goosebumps when you said that. Normally when I get goosebumps and my hair raises, to me, it's always a sign of getting to bear witness to powerful truth. Powerful truth. So this next question, or wait, no, you didn't share your third.
My third one, yes. So my third one is that throughout my career, I've kind of learned, this is a learning one, that to prioritize relationships over projects. And that the best projects or work that I've ever done, you know, has ease in it, and it works because of the people that I work with, because we have shared values and interests and objectives, and that's so vital to connect. And a couple of times I've gotten into projects where it was, you know, like really lovely people, but we just didn't really know each other, and we didn't really understand each other's like perspective or where we were coming from or each other's values. And they ended up being really difficult projects. I had one where somebody kind of just disappeared and ghosted, and I was left with this huge research project to do all by myself when, you know, I didn't even know what I was doing. And it took me years to finish that project, when it could have just been so straightforward if we had known each other better. Or even if I had known maybe this was the wrong project for me, and to just, you know, not do it, right? And so I did use my skills at creatively reorienting things, but, you know, it was really hard and difficult. And one of my best projects, I ended up working with the former president of my university, and we got a grant to do a project with Google Sidewalk Lab. So they had, they were going to be creating this digital city in Toronto, and they wanted researchers to talk about things. And I was like, wow, this is a really cool opportunity for a very controversial project to talk about things which for me are kind of like critical and like are making people question things, like you talked about in my bio. And so we talked about culture in the context of digital world and what it really means to create something digital that will work in real life. Anyway, so we did, we had such a small amount of time because industry, is very different to an understanding of how long a research project will take. But we had a very short space of time. We did this incredible project. It flowed. It was beautiful. And it really was because of the people in the team. My colleagues, Rachna and Zoe and Marcus and Sarah, and it was just, we even ended up on the front cover of the newspaper. I did not expect that, talking about the project. And it's because of the people, and it wasn't because of the project. And we still had a really interesting time doing it, and we were able to do it in 3 months. And for me, that is kind of like really, for a research project, a comprehensive one, to do it in that short space of time is really, really like radical, to do it so well.
Such a powerful one, because particularly in this country that I'm in, the United States, I see this all the time, especially when I coach in people in corporate. We are not very good about prioritizing relationships over project. We have not gotten the memo that you're always going to go further when you are, it all boils down to relationship. We're in relationship with everything. And I think this is so important. So please hear this. If anyone is watching this and you're in corporate or any areas where it's challenging to bring that, because if you're a conscious, heart-centered thought leader, this might be for you to bring to your team. When we can be in relationship, there is more trust. When there is more trust, there's less micromanagement, more people show up. And oh, I could not love this. Wait, I'm like, why is my AirPods telling me it moved to my iPhone? Stop. I don't even have my phone.
You.
Okay, good. I was like, what's happening right now? But that's one that we're starting to get the memo here more. But I think for a lot of us, especially those of us who are wired to be really like, it doesn't feel safe to put the relationship before the project. But it takes an evolved person and a future visionary to say anything like that. So thank you for that invitation, because that's where we're heading. It's just taking some time, particularly in this country. But what I want all of you to hear is, when you put your relationship before the project, any of you who are worried about the ROI, your ROI is actually going to be met, and met more exceedingly, when you put the relationship before the project. Your parts that are telling you that's not true, they're lying. Don't listen. It's true. Relationship first is always going to create a bigger win. And what you said, there's more ease and there's more fun in the project. And what if we could be doing everything with more fun and ease?
And more love.
Amazing. And more love. Yes, and more love. Yeah, that's awesome. And so this next question is one that we can never fully know what the answer is. It's hypothetical, but we just kind of want to get people present to whether we make that bold move or not. It's okay. We're not here to tell anyone what they have to do or to pass judgment. What I want to really illustrate in this question is, there's an impact if we stay, and there's an impact if we leap for it. And you did say earlier, for you, that part of the reason why you took the PhD was it sounded like you were really present in that moment to, if you didn't do it, you knew there would have been some regret, and you didn't want to spend your life regretting. So to the best of your ability, if you kind of imagine, let's just say, you were never open to the unexpected in the way that you were. You didn't kind of follow that trail of serendipitous breadcrumbs that eventually led you to taking that role in your PhD program. Where do you think you might be if you didn't follow that trail?
Yeah, I'd probably still be a jewelry designer. That would be my main career. But I think when I think about this question, I'd be someone with much less substance. I think, like you were talking about this idea of integration, that the whole of my life, the breadth of it so far, has shown me that, to make an impact, it's about bringing everything together. And it's been so much work over the years to do that very consciously over the past maybe 5 to 7 years that I've been really working on that consciously. Like I will write things to integrate who I am together. I will do it by hand. But that now being who I am, I realized that I can create beauty. I can still be a jewelry designer. I can put beautiful things in the world. But at the same time, I can do more than that. I can be of service. I can support others. I can form caring relationships that are intentional, and I can create sustainable change. And so all of those other things, like I actually don't know if I would have gotten to those in quite the same way if I hadn't.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing, I think, to really illustrate is because, I think a lot of people have this imagination that, if we stay, life is going to be horrible. And if we leap, it's going to be amazing. But what almost all of my guests are really illustrating is life would have been okay had we stayed where we were and didn't make the bold move. And, when we make it, though, it has the ability to give us more substance, to make a bigger impact, to bring it all together. And that is what I love being highlighted, because we're not doing these things because we have to. In many cases, we're doing these things because it's just a choice of, what if there's more than what I've been told I could have? What if I could have this and that and that? And so now you still get to be a jewelry designer, and it looks very different than it would have before, is my guess.
Yeah. And when I think about it, it's like when I thought about this question, it wasn't about the things that I've achieved. It's the way that I do things that actually I realize is the most significant thing that's come out of it. And if you remember when we were in leadership together, it was so important for me to focus on how I was showing up and how I was creating what I was creating, around me, and that, it was the how, and it was the being.
Yeah, and I always love when people talk about this, because it is, the premise of the work that I do, and it is not as talked about, particularly in our culture. I think a very common American way is, if you're not putting in 80 hours a week and working really, really hard, you're not going to get it, and it's not going to be good enough. And, what I really try to illustrate with people is, there are so many ways we could go about getting the thing. So if there are, why not create it in a way that is more joyful, more conscious, more fun, more easeful? And again, people who are really, really attached to results, when we do that, there is actually research, and I haven't studied it for a while. And the woman who was doing the research, sadly, is no longer with us. But she was a neuroscientist, an educator who was going into corporate and doing a lot of coaching. And what she found was, when we do what you just said, Alia, when we focus on the way we want to achieve it versus the achievement, the ROI goes up like 30% or more. So, I think that's one of the things where people have to really try it to see that it works, because we get a mindset that says it won't. But I'm really about, like, and a perfect example is, we're making my website launch official next week. And, I was talking to my person, and I was like, there's all kinds of ways this could go. And I don't want it to go the way of where we're at the last minute dotting the I's and crossing the T's and creating overwhelm. We've had a lot of time. We don't need to go that way. Let's have it be easeful and joyful and flowing to next week. That's the way it's going to work for me. So can you support me with creating it that way, my support team, please? And so, I let her know my vision of how I wanted the launch to happen, because it was important for me to have fun and not have it be overwhelming, right? We have this way of like these amazing things become overwhelming.
Yeah, exactly.
I
And I remember an example was when we were in doing our program. So one of the things I created was like not to do with my academic teaching, but outside of that, I ended up working in a program doing some kind of business training for people in the community outside of the university. And a leadership part of it was really important, kind of inspiring others to overcome their challenges in the way that I talked about earlier with the creativity and adversity. And the most beautiful thing happened, it was that the intention that I put into what I was creating, participants were actually coming to me and saying out loud what my intentions were without me actually saying them in like in speech in the program. And that just really showed me that kind of the power of, sorry, there's a moth, of intention and being and putting that out into the world. And what a beautiful experience it was. And I really didn't I was like, I'm going to create this thing. And I knew that I know that it would work when, I know there was a moment, and that was the moment when it was reflected back at me like that.
It's powerful when you get that reflection back. It makes it all so worth it. So for the final question, and this is where I just have to, again, acknowledge you and any former guest. Everyone who's ever been a guest has been so giving. I never expected the amount of giving that everyone got. And even if we didn't have this last question about one piece of sage wisdom, you've already given so much. And you may choose to share something that you've already shared, just to recap it and put more power behind it. But it's also a chance, if there's anything else just percolating, if you were to go out and leave the listeners with any sage wisdom to really living a bold life, what would be the notes that you would like to go out on?
So one is that I think that having a purpose that's like outside of myself has been so important for guiding me in what I do. And I have this personal motto or like phrase, which is that it's about, I work empowering society through creative enterprise. And so whenever I'm making decisions around, where I'm going, that helps me actually align everything that I do. So when we talk about integration, right, I want to be integrated all the time, and I want to be bringing all the different parts of me together. And that really helps me do it in a very active way, the way that I phrase it. Another thing that I think is important to me is that my aunt, the same one that I talked about earlier, she's like one of the biggest role models I have in my life. She's also a professor in the UK, and she's both a dentist and a doctor, and she has a PhD and she's a professor. She's like supremely accomplished, amazing human who I deeply respect. And, she studied at a time when there were quotas for Black women in medicine. And she couldn't get into medical school because there was a quota for it. So she went and studied dentistry, and then she came back and studied medicine later.
Wow.
So I really admire her for her determination. And she was like, always do something different every 5 years. And she told me that about 20 years ago, and it really stuck with me. Maybe that's part of why I keep, being daring and trying new things, because like shaking it up and let's try something else. So recently I got the opportunity to be an associate dean in my faculty. And as it seems, it's quite early in my career to take up a role like that. But I was like listening to my aunt's advice. I was like, okay, why not? I'll do that role. And it ended up being a really beautiful experience, and being, it gave me the opportunity to be in a leadership role and to kind of practice my kind of ideas that I talked about earlier about like caring and love and like, and that kind of leadership perspective. I would only ever have gotten to that, from listening to my aunt's advice. And yeah, I think for me, I'm starting now to think about what I'm doing again for the next 5 years. And it's all about integration. And I realized that I have neglected my creative self. So I'm putting more energy into that, putting energy into everything. But, because I want to kind of like fill, you always talk about filling, up things, right? And I love that, filling up one's cup. And yeah, so I think that would be kind of an advice as well of like, reflecting on what you feel might be missing, and just, not forcing it, but kind of like being inspired to grow it, and integrate it with what you're already doing. Because then it makes it easier to make it happen rather than seeing it as like a thing out here.
Yeah, these are so important. So for the first piece of the advice, something bigger than you, it's so important, I think, to have something that resonates in our heart that is going to make an impact out there, because they would always tell us in our coaching and leadership training in my first program, your fear is making it so that you're being selfish with your gifts. The world is not getting to benefit from what you have to provide. And, that was a lot of the work we did too, to find out like what connected our heart to something bigger, because you're going to keep showing up. And I love what you said about alignment, particularly because the theme that I'm teaching in a lot of the groups I'm doing for March is alignment. And, not only does our thought and our word and our action have to align, but if we don't have that future thing we're looking at, it's super challenging to make powerful choices in the present when you don't know where they're bringing you, or, what they're in service of. So that is so important. And having a mentor, someone like your aunt, it's so important to have someone modeling that, sharing that wisdom, and, doing something different every 5 years. I mean, talk about a great way of not getting stuck in a comfort zone. You'll see some people who are like, no, I'm going to stay in this job that is crushing my soul and taking my life for another 15 years, because then I get to retire. My 15 years? Okay, do you want to talk about this? It's okay if you don't, but I'm concerned you're going to make it for another 15 years. And, that's heartbreaking. So I love that. And then I love the piece of what's missing and the using it as a place to grow. So often when we find what's missing, it's another place where we beat ourselves up. And it's like, no, you're human. There's always going to be a missing. And it's just saying, oh, okay, that's what I'm going to focus on right now. I'm going to go into my growth mindset. I'm going to work on that. And the theme of a lot of what you said is integration. And that is a really, really important theme. And if you're watching this and it's a fairly newer concept to you, my invitation is just to kind of chew on it. What does it mean to you? What would it look like to be fully integrated? And remember, that's the practice. We practice over time, everyone. There's no there, as I like to say with a lot of the stuff. We just keep going. Alia, this was just so amazing. Absolutely amazing. I'm just floored by all the gifts that you shared. I am so excited for this to be out there in the world. Viewers, thank you for watching this. And as always, my request is, if there's anyone that you sense would be inspired, empowered, in the possibility to see this message, please share it. There is a massive power when people share their stories. There's a massive power when we bear witness to another human story. And, it normalizes creativity and life by design. And that is not the norm of what we've been shown, at least in this country that I live in, the United States. So share it. Let this go viral. Let love go viral. Let possibility go viral. And again, I'm going to have all the ways, if you're just interested in knowing more about Alia and connecting with her and finding some of her beautiful jewelry, all of that is going to be here on whatever platform you are viewing this on. And Alia, thank you so much. My gratitude is just pouring into you. I'm sending it all the way down to Zimbabwe right now.
Oh, thank you, Jen. You're the best. I love you. And you are such a dear human. I really thank you so much for inviting me. And this has been a joy.
Oh, thank you for being a yes. You have made my whole day. Until next time, viewers, for another episode of Living a Bold Life. Love you all.